This is episode 225 of That Shakespeare Life. See, coordinating visual elements for our show today, including images of the hobby horse dances and costumes, when you sign in as a patron on our show notes page. If you're not yet a patron, you can sign up today to access these detailed show notes and all the benefits of supporting our show at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife.
So you have the hobby horseman. There is a man who is wearing a full horse's body around his waist. This body is made of wickerwork and then is covered by cloth, and there is an actual horse's head and a tail, and the man appears as the rider of the horse.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
When you hear the term hobby horse, you may be tempted to recall images of toy wooden horses that children laugh and play on. But for Shakespeare's lifetime, this term refers to a particular kind of dance that featured in popular celebrations like May Day and Morris dances. The hobby horse dance was characterized and often costumed representations of a person riding a horse. It was a staple feature of these celebratory dances. Our guest this week has written extensively about the history of the hobby horse and where they would have appeared in Shakespeare's lifetime. We're delighted to welcome professor at Eotvos Lorand, University of Budapest, and the author of Shakespeare's Hobby Horse and Early Modern Popular Culture, Dr. Natalia Pikli. Dr. Natalia Pikli is Associate Professor at the Department of English Studies at Eotvos Lorand University, Budapest, Hungary. Please excuse my pronunciation there. I'm sure Natalia does it better. She is the current president of the Hungarian Shakespeare Committee. Her research interests are wide-ranging, with a strong focus on early modern popular culture, Shakespeare, theater, drama, cheap print, and emblems, besides the present-day reception of Shakespeare in the theater and popular culture. She has published extensively on these topics and contributed to several books. We have a complete list of what she has written and where you can find more about Natalia's work in the show notes for today's episode. Hello, Natalia. Welcome to the show.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Were hobby horses always performed with a person dressed as a horse, or were they sometimes a person riding a fake horse, almost like a stick horse, for example?
Let's make it clear. Let me explain. There are two major types to hobby horses. One is the so-called skull and pole type, which is, you have a large stick and there is a skull or a simulacrum of a skull attached to it, and there is a man holding it up. It's actually a biped structure. So you have a man with this skull and pole structure of a horse, and usually it's covered with a foot cloth, or the man might be wearing a sieve, and it gives some body to the horse, but it's a two-legged creature. This is the folkloric version, which appears in many regions all around Europe. And there are some examples for this in Great Britain as well, like the Padstow Old Horse and some other. But the hobby horse that I'm talking about in my book, the early modern hobby horse, is of a different type. It's called a tourney horse, or a tourney-style horse. And the way you have to picture it is a kind of a horse and rider. So you have the hobby horseman. There is a man who is wearing a full horse's body around his waist. This body is made of wickerwork and then is covered by cloth, and there is an actual horse's head and a tail, and the man appears as the rider of the horse. And it has, several legs, not just two, and quite often there are even four legs with stirrups attached to the foot cloth of the horse. And this is the horse this is the hobby horse that appears in the Battley window and the landscape painting, which remained to us from Shakespeare's time. And we have other textual evidence confirming this type of hobby horse being very, very popular in Shakespeare's lifetime.
What is it about the purpose of a Morris dance that was considered essential to have a hobby horse be depicted for one of these performances?
We are talking about the early modern Morris dance in England. And it's very important to clarify because there were so many different forms in so many different regions for the Morris, Moresca, Morris cantons, and other names. And actually, the dance itself also has various forms and types, appeared in various contexts throughout Europe from the late Middle Ages to the early modern times. But when we focus on Shakespeare's period and the type of Morris dance that became very, very popular in England in the 16th century, we have a highly popular phenomenon, a set of dancers. It could be 4, 6, or 8 dancers, only men, who were dancing with very high leaps, representing the vitality of folk culture and a kind of a fertility aspect as well. And they were wearing sleeves which were decorated with long flowing ribbons, and they were also wearing bells on their calves and knees. So it was a very lively and quite noisy country dance, to which the fool, the hobby horse, maid Marian, and occasionally even friar tuck was added during the 16th century. So to put it simply, the hobby horse and the Morris dance both became very popular by the end of the 16th century as symbols of popular culture and mostly of rural culture, but they were never totally, absolutely attached. So the hobby horse was a very popular but not indispensable part of the Morris dance in the 16th and 17th centuries. They both made it to the popular stages and cheap print products, so they became very, very popular.
Now you're talking about Maid Marian and Friar Tuck from the Robin Hood legends?
Yes.
So they're retelling that story?
Okay, we can tell that story as well. As typical with such folklore and popular phenomena, we have different traditions mixing. So when you have the Morris dancers with their long ribbons flowing and the high leaps, because they were symbolizing vitality, fertility, and the hobby horse with its aspect of fertility was also attached to it, it was easy to connect them to the other native tradition in England, the Robin Hood tradition, which is also associated with green men and the wilderness and nature. So by the time, so we have different traditions, different native traditions merging in the Morris dance by the time Shakespeare and his contemporaries make the hobby horse and the Morris dance appear on public stages and also in other forms of entertainment.
So when the hobby horse is appearing in these performances, is it a friendly character or a villain?
Definitely a friendly one, although not without a bit of aggression. It's a playful and a bit sexual kind of aggression that the hobby horse represents. Well, if you look at the picture in the Battle window, or in the if you look at the 2 depictions of the hobby horse, you can see that it was easy for the hobby horseman to drag a girl under the skirt or the footcloth and do God knows what to the girl there. So it was a kind of an interactive character which not only danced and leaped and entertained the audience, but also interacted with the audience, sometimes in a more or less sexual way. And this is what an anonymous poem refers to from the time. There was this cheap pamphlet published in 1614, Cobb's Prophecies, and there is a description of a country Morris dance there, and I'm just quoting it. So then, but when the hobby horse did vihi, oh pretty vihi, then all the wenches gave a tihi, oh pretty tihi. So this association of the hobby horse and wenches having fun together was a kind of a sexual play, or an almost sexual play. And one more aspect to the hobby horse was that in this interaction with the audience, the hobby horse was the character which asked for donations from the onlookers. Sometimes it was the fool, sometimes it was the hobby horse man, or the hobby horse or the hobby horseman, but definitely both the fool and the hobby horse were these extrovert characters in the Morris dance, interacting very strongly with the audience.
Now, Shakespeare mentions the hobby horse phrase 7 times in his plays, at least twice, suggesting that it is bad for the hobby horse to be forgot. This phrase, quote, the hobby horse is forgot, end quote, comes up in Hamlet and again in Love's Labour's Lost. Was the hobby horse a symbol of good luck, such that forgetting the hobby horse was seen as a kind of bad omen, or why was it significant to forget the hobby horse?
Well, there lies a complicated history behind this question. So first of all, for all the hobby horse is forgot was a very popular phrase, a kind of a set phrase at around the turn of the century, at the turn of the 16th and 17th century, so at around 1600. There are several plays, royal entertainments, cheap pamphlets, which mention the phrase almost literally in the same format. We have Hamlet, we have Love's Labour's Lost by Shakespeare. Also, Will Kemp's cheap pamphlet about his own Morris dance contains the phrase almost verbatim. And there is a Ben Jonson royal entertainment, the entertainment at Antwerp, and another anonymous quarto, Old Meg of Herefordshire from 1609, which have this phrase. So it must have been a viral phrase at the time, as a set phrase. And scholarly opinion has held for long that it's a line from a lost ballad. But actually, I did some research in this, and there is no such ballad. Okay, a lot of ballads were lost. So out of the 4 million ballads circulating in these 2 centuries, only a fragment remained to us. But still, there must have been some other trace of a ballad. So I rather surmise that there must have been a folk song, what's more, a dancing folk song, which contained the line for all the hobby horses forgot. And now coming to Hamlet and how Hamlet uses it in Shakespeare's tragedy, where Shakespeare was a very tricky author. And the more you study Shakespeare, the more you study the age of Shakespeare, you realize how tricky he was. The word hobby horse had actually 5 different meanings in Shakespeare's time. And people used the word in these 5 different meanings. And only one of them was the Morris dance character, this costumed half horse, half man hobby horse. It could also refer to an actual small horse of Irish origin, a hobby or hobbying. It could refer to the toy horse for children with a stick, and the horse's head. It could refer to loose women or whores, and also to fools. And in association, it could also mean a kind of a trifle or a thing of no value. So these meanings were all used in the late 16th and early 17th century by people of the time. That is why the hobby horse was presented a kind of palimpsest of meanings, and contemporaries of Shakespeare could understand it on different levels. And Shakespeare is playing with it a lot here. So we have Hamlet, and we are just before the mousetrap scene. So they are kind of preparing as audience to watch a play. And we have already had these very boldly references by Hamlet to Ophelia about lying in her lap and talking about country manners and such. And then he has this passage about the hobby horse being forgotten. On one hand, he remembers his father, and he longs for a bygone age, which belongs to his father. And the hobby horse, by the end of the 16th century, is partly a remembered and partly a forgotten and partly a still alive cultural phenomenon. Because, it's a bit complicated again, but it belongs to an age that was seen by most people of Shakespeare's time as a kind of a bygone golden age, a merry old England type of a period when everything was better. We always long for bygone ages, which were much better than ours. But in Shakespeare's time, this bygone age that has already passed was strongly associated with the hobby horse. So Hamlet uses this phrase as a viral phrase, kind of a crowd tickler. Also, he uses it to refer to his old Hamlet, his father's time as a bygone age. But because it's also in the context of sexual flirting with Ophelia, the meaning of the hobby horse as a loose woman lingers in the background of the audience. And also because Hamlet is playing his own fool, in a sense, so he's behaving and joking as a fool, as a court fool. The meaning of the hobby horse as a fool is also lingers in the background for the audience who were living in Shakespeare's time. It's all lost to us, so we just have fragments of these subsidiary meanings.
Was the hobby horse also associated with love? Because Shakespeare uses the hobby horse in Love Labour's Lost to refer to his love being called a hobby horse. And then in A Winter's Tale, Leontes refers to his wife by calling her a hobby horse. Based on your definitions for hobby horse, are these insults, I guess, to these women? Or how was that supposed to be taken in terms of the cultural significance of calling a woman a hobby horse?
Yes, they are insults.
Okay.
They are insults. So in this meaning of the hobby horse, the word means a loose woman, a prostitute. this is how we made it in Love's Labour is Lost. And actually we have, this young page, when very, very perky page, Moth talking to his master, Don Armado, the Spanish knight. And Armado says, but oh, Moth, the hobby horse is forgot. And Armado asks, callest thou my love a hobby horse? And Moth answers, no, master, the hobby horse is but a colt, and your love perhaps a hackney. So it's not only the phrase and the reference to a loose woman that we have here, but also Moth reaffirms this meaning of the hobby horse as a loose woman with the word hackney, which is a hired horse. And I think you can see the similarity or the parallelism.
Yes,
here.
we follow.
Yeah. And I already mentioned Hamlet. And interestingly, in Othello, we have it all turned upside down, because in a play which resonates with the word whore a lot, actually all three women are called whores at one point in Othello, we have the actual prostitute, Bianca, using this word. So it's quite unusual that it is a woman using it as a kind of an insult to a man. The scene is the following. So we have Cassio giving Bianca, his prostitute, the handkerchief, Desdemona's handkerchief that Emilio has stolen from Desdemona. And actually, Iago and Othello are just watching this scene. And then Cassio gives this handkerchief to Bianca with the words, take the pattern out. That is, copy the pattern, the embroidery on it. And then Bianca is quite offended, of course. And he returns the handkerchief with the words, take it, give it to your hobby horse. So actually, it's a woman calling another woman a hobby horse, but it's also an act of denial and an act of defiance on part of Bianca. So that's why I'm saying that Shakespeare uses this word in a very tricky and highly complex dramaturgical way, as opposed to his contemporaries, who usually have much simpler or more direct references. And finally, and most painfully, in The Winter's Tale, we have the king of Sicily, Leontes, calling his beautiful, virtuous, and very pregnant wife a hobby horse that is a whore. And this tragic act of jealousy will launch a series of events that ends in a family tragedy for 16 years.
I don't think until you explained the meaning of the hobby horse, the full force of that comment had hit me there of what exactly he set off. But because of course it does, just this domino effect of tragedy in that one for sure. Now, I want to ask about the hobby horse being used as symbols for political devices. I think I'm trying to draw a modern day parallel, and I think of the phrase crybaby or lame duck imagery that people in government will throw around in campaign speeches to make a point or to insult their opponent. And I wonder if hobby horse had ever been used by Shakespeare or other early modern playwrights in this political way.
Yes, not in plays, or if we ignore the previous comments about women called hobby horses as insults, with a political edge, it was first used in the Marprelate tracts in the late 1580s, early 1590s, and there was this controversy around the bishops and Puritans, and we have in one of the Martin Marprelate tracts an insult when the Archbishop of Canterbury is called John of Kent, and his hired man is called a hobby horse. And this is a politically abusive term at the point and at that time. But it seems to disappear as a political term of abuse for a while. And the political edge returns later after the 1610s, mostly in the 1620s, when the whole idea and concept of popular rural culture becomes a site of contention between the king and the more radical Puritan Sabbatarian factions who hate festivities. And this is when King James I issues the Book of Sports, a royal decree defending country pastimes. And there seems to be this kind of a unity or this kind of an association between king and common people, as opposed to the Puritan sects, which shows in public plays, which shows in professional plays on the public stages at the time as well. We have a play by John Fletcher, Women Pleased. It was first performed in 1620, in which the hobby horse and this whole contention about whether the hobby horse should be included in the Morris dance or not is also a question of being a Puritan or not being a Puritan. And the hobby horse is called the Beast of Babylon by the Puritan character and his wife, And there are all other abusive terms used for the hobby horse, like it was got by the Pope's coach horses, and its mother is the mare of ignorance, and other such abuses directed at the hobby horse, which was a symbol of popular culture at the time, and also a symbol of a political faction, so to say.
Natalia's work mentions two noble kinsmen specifically in relation to the hobby horse and the portrayal of a mad woman of a morris dance. Natalia, how is the hobby horse used in Two Noble Kinsmen?
Again, it's not an easy question to answer. So let's start from the play proper. The Two Noble Kinsmen is a collaborative play. It was written by John Fletcher and William Shakespeare in 1613 and performed in 1613. And this is a time when Shakespeare is starting to retire and actually giving his plays over to John Fletcher with the company, with the Kingsmen. And they are working together on several plays. The Lost Play Cardenio, The Two Noble Kinsmen, and All Is Lost or 100 Days is the other title. And well, scholars debate which scenes belong to Shakespeare, which scenes belong to Fletcher. But I think I mostly agree with Lois Potter, who said that they were really working in a collaborative way. So they were writing stuff, but they were also revising each other's scenes. And in the Morris dance scene, or in the scenes which refer to the country Morris dancers and the hobby horse, they mostly belong to Fletcher, but they must have been written in imitation of Shakespeare or under the supervision of Shakespeare. So it's very hard to tell whether it's Shakespeare or Fletcher talking about the hobby horse or in the Morris dance in the Two Noble Kinsmen, especially because it's used in an unusual way. We do not have an actual hobby horse appearing, but we have a bavian or a baboon or a monkey. But this bavian or baboon or this monkey figure is also a sexual figure. It's emphasized that he has a long tool, and you know what I mean here. And the Morris dancers again appear untraditionally, not only men, but an equal number of men and women. And the mad jailer's daughter joins them to fill out the ranks, so to have an equal number of men and women. So this is how she joins the Morris dance, which is partly typical, partly untypical. It's typical in the sense that there are country people performing it for the aristocrats, Theseus and his court in Athens. And also there's a schoolmaster directed them very similarly to Peter Quince in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And there are also sexual references, a lot of them, as usual with such country pastimes. But as I mentioned, we don't have a hobby horse, but we have a bavian. And also women appearing in the Morris dance as actual dancers is untypical. And it all goes back to a mask, to a royal mask written by Fletcher's good friend, Beaumont, actually just a little bit earlier in 1613. And this royal mask featured, or anti-mask, featured an equal number of men and women, a he-baboon and a she-baboon, and other people. And because it was part of royal entertainment performed for Queen Anne and Prince Henry and Princess Elizabeth, it could not have included a hobby horse. You know, hobby horses were unseemly for royal audiences in royal entertainments. As regards the jailer's daughter in the Two Noble Kinsmen, she's a very interesting character. She falls madly in love with Palamon, one of the knights, and it's hopeless. And actually she knows that. So she knows that this love is hopeless and she has no means to get to Palamon, but still she cannot, so she cannot stop loving Palamon. And therefore she goes mad. And while mad, she sings all kinds of country and bawdy songs and joins the Morris dancers. She talks about a hobby horse to his father. She talks about a gift horse, a love gift given to her by Palamon, but it's all imagination. So that's what she imagines. And that's when she mentions the hobby horse in connection with this imaginary love gift of a horse, how the hobby horse can dance. And it's not just any, so there are different traditions of horses mixing here in her imagination and also in the text of the play. So we have this imaginary love horse as a gift. We have the hobby horse dancing and prancing mentioned. We have the trick horse of Banks' trick horse. And because it is emphasized by the daughter that this strange horse can even read and write. And this all symbolizes the kind of deviation that the jailer's daughter represents in the play.
Obviously, there is a ton to unpack and explore about the hobby horse and its history, and just looking into it, just this little bit we've covered today is Fascinating. I wonder if you could point us in a good direction for some books or resources that you could recommend we use to explore this further.
Mhm. While I started writing my book is that I found a niche in scholarship because the hobby horse has been treated by several scholars in several disciplines, and none of them had a look at the big picture. Because the hobby horse is a very complex symbol in Shakespeare's lifetime, and we have dance historians, we have anthropologists, we have folklorists, we have people of iconographic studies, we have animal studies mentioning the hobby horse, but I had to connect the dots. So actually, I think my book is the first one that sort of connects all the dots. But I did learn a lot from the following books. First of all, there is John Forrest's The History of Morris Dancing from 1455 to 1740, which is a magisterial work. He collected all information on Morris dances together with his colleague Michael Heaney for several years, even a decade. And after this, he wrote this book, which is a very good book in terms of records and in terms of looking at the hobby horse and the Morris dance from a dance historian's perspective. But when it comes to literary or theater history aspects, he makes some mistakes or he makes some even factual errors. But it's a great book. Another book that is worth reading is Mary Ellen Lamb's The Popular Culture of Shakespeare, Spenser, and Johnson. Although she doesn't talk very much about the hobby horse, she talks very informatively about how, when it comes to early modern popular culture in England, we should talk about cultures and productions in the plural of popular culture, because there are so many variants and so many different forms. And finally, Ronald Hutton's The Rise and Fall of Merry England is the work of a cultural historian, stuffed full with data. So it's very dense with information. It's not a bedtime reading, but it's a kind of book that you keep on your bookshelf close to your hand. And if some people are interested in other works from an anthropological or folklorist perspective, I would recommend Violet Orford's or Coates' book, Ritual Animal Disguise, but I think they will be put in the show notes.
Yes, we will link to Natalia's book in the show notes, as well as these resources she's mentioned today. And Natalia has graciously sent us a list of scholarly works that relate to the Morris dance, to the hobby horse, and performances in early modern England. And we will include the entire list in the show notes for today's episode. So make sure you go there to find those. Natalia, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
Well, since I started listening to your podcast sometime during the pandemic, I have been thinking about this question, and I would opt for Holinshed's Chronicles, Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles, because with the Bible and Shakespeare, I have all the poetry and drama I need and the spiritual guidance, but I need more stories or histories. And I have never, ever had the time to read all the 6 huge volumes, folio volumes of Holinshed's Chronicles. And I think I would be well set with stories for long, long years to come.
I think that is a good use of your time on your deserted island to finally finish all of Holinshed's Chronicles. That's an excellent choice. So what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
I'm working on several projects, as most scholars do, but I'm mostly excited about my research projects on unsung heroes of Shakespeare's time. That is, writers, career writers, mostly of cheap pamphlets, verse and prose pamphlets, who were very, very popular in Shakespeare's lifetime, and they were very well known, but they are totally forgotten by now, like Nicholas Breton or George Wither. I ran into their works while doing research on the hobby horse, and I simply fell in love with their very bad poetry. They are usually very bad poets in aesthetic standards, but they are very informative on the culture of the age. And Nicholas Breton is mentioned in my book several times, as well as George Wither. And actually, people do not know them, but they are very interesting in terms of cultural history. It's like, time travel of sorts.
I'm excited to hear you studying that. I can't wait to see this project come out, because I feel like we are constantly talking and referencing 2 pamphlets in the context of our show. You're always finding out something about Shakespeare's culture from these pamphlets. So that's an exciting project. We'll look forward to seeing that come to fruition. Natalia Pikli, thank you so much for being here with us this week and taking us through the history of the hobby horse, explaining what it is and how it worked in Shakespeare's lifetime. This has been a fun conversation, and I thank you for being here.
Well, the pleasure was mine. Thank you very much.
If you like the show today, be sure to let us know about it. Drop us a comment and a rating on the platform you're listening from today. And now for the show notes. Don't forget to stop by the show notes for today's episode. It is packed with tons of extras. Natalia has sent over links to resources as well as provided images and pictures from her research into the history of hobby horses. And we have made all of that available completely free in the show notes page for today's episode. You can find all of these things at CassidyCash.com/episode 225. That's CassidyCash.com/EP225. The show notes page is also where you can unlock even more bonus history extras by signing in as a patron. We have an orange Patreon button on the show notes page where you can log in with your Patreon credentials and unlock pages of extra content. These are called our detailed show notes, and they're only for patrons. So make sure you log in there to find those. Our show this week is brought to you completely free and without any commercials, thanks to the support of listeners just like you who signed up to be our patrons on Patreon. Thank you for your support. If you would like to be a part of continuing the legacy of William Shakespeare and get access to insider extras like detailed show notes, printables for our DIY history episodes on YouTube, and a monthly Shakespeare history book club, then sign up to be our patron right now at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That's patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. Our show this week is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash, and our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.